As twilight descends upon the rolling hills of a nascent Europe, we find ourselves drawn to the flickering warmth of a manor's great hall. Here, in the hushed whispers of candlelight and crackling hearths, we bear witness to the birth of a system that would come to define the very fabric of medieval society. Tonight, we delve into the origins of manorial accounting, a quiet yet powerful force that shaped the ebb and flow of daily life in these formative years. In the soft glow of this ancient chamber, we could almost hear the scratching of quills on parchment, the murmur of stewards tallying harvests, and the gentle clink of coins being counted. These are the sounds of a revolution, not of swords and battle cries, but of numbers and ledgers. A revolution that would transform the way lords and peasants alike understood their world. As we settle into our seats, the weight of history presses upon us. The air is thick with the scent of wood smoke and the earthy aroma of autumn harvests. Outside, the fields lie fallow, awaiting the next season's planting. But within these walls, a different kind of cultivation is taking root. It is here, in manners much like this one, that the seeds of modern accounting were first sown. Let us cast our minds back to a time when literacy was a rare and precious skill, when the vast majority of people lived and died without ever seeing a written word. In this world, the ability to record and track resources was nothing short of magical. It was a power that could turn chaos into order, uncertainty into predictability. The rise of manorial accounting was not a sudden event, but rather a gradual awakening. It began with simple tallies, notches carved into wood or marks made on parchment to count sheep, bushels of grain, or days of labor. But as manors grew in size and complexity, so too did the need for more sophisticated methods of record keeping. Imagine, if you will, the first steward to realize that by keeping careful records of income and expenditure, he could better advise his lord on the management of the estate. This was a revelation, a moment of clarity that would ripple through time, changing the very nature of feudal relationships. As we lean in closer, we can almost see the pages of the earliest manorial accounts. They are not the neat, orderly ledgers we might expect, but rather a hodgepodge of notes, lists, and calculations. Here, a record of rents paid in kind, eggs, cheese, and bushels of wheat. There, a tally of days worked by the villains in the Lord's fields. And everywhere, a constant struggle to balance income against outgo, to ensure that the manor not only survived, but thrived. The importance of these early accounting practices cannot be overstated. In a world where currency was scarce and barter was common, the ability to track and value non-monetary transactions was crucial. It allowed lords to understand the true wealth of their estates, not just in terms of gold and silver, but in the produce of the land and the labor of their tenants. But manorial accounting was more than just a tool for the wealthy and powerful. It was a system that touched the lives of every person on the estate, from the lowly serf to the lord himself. For the peasants, it provided a measure of certainty in an uncertain world. They knew what was expected of them, how many days they must work in the Lord as fields, how much of their own harvest they must surrender as rent. And while these obligations were often heavy, the very act of recording them gave them a kind of permanence. a protection against arbitrary increases. For the lords, manorial accounting offered a window into the workings of their estates. It allowed them to identify areas of waste or inefficiency, to plan for lean years, and to make informed decisions about investments in new tools or techniques. In many ways, it was the birth of strategic management, centuries before the term would be coined. As we sit here in the gathering darkness, we can feel the weight of these innovations settling around us. The rise of manorial accounting was not just an economic development, but a cultural one as well. It changed the way people thought about time, about labor, about the very nature of wealth itself. Consider the impact on the concept of time. In a world governed by the rhythms of nature, the turning of the seasons, the rising and setting of the sun, manorial accounting introduced a new kind of time. It was a time measured not in days or seasons, but in labor, owed and rents due. It was a time that could be divided, allocated, and accounted for with precision. And what of labor? No longer was work simply a necessity of survival, but a commodity that could be measured, valued, and exchanged. The days of villains spent working in the Lord's fields were carefully recorded, as were the skills of craftsmen and the output of mills and brewhouses. This quantification of labor would have profound implications for the development of wage labor and eventually the rise of capitalism. But perhaps the most significant impact of manorial accounting was on the concept of wealth itself. In a world where most wealth was tied to the land, the ability to accurately assess and compare the value of different estates was revolutionary. It allowed for more complex financial arrangements, for the rise of credit and investment, and for the gradual shift from a subsistence economy to one based on surplus and trade. As we sit here in the flickering light, we can almost see the future unfolding before us. The practices developed in these manorial halls would evolve over centuries, spreading beyond the confines of the feudal system to shape the commercial revolutions of the late Middle Ages and the Renaissance. They would form the foundation for the double-entry bookkeeping of Venetian merchants, the joint stock companies of the age of exploration, and ultimately, the complex financial systems of our modern world. But for now, in this moment suspended between the ancient world and the one yet to come, we pause to appreciate the quiet revolution taking place around us. In the scratching of quills and the murmur of voices, we hear the birth cries of a new way of understanding the world. A way based not on tradition or superstition, but on careful observation and meticulous record-keeping. As the night deepens and the candles burn low, we prepare to take our leave of this ancient hall. But we do so with a newfound appreciation for the power of numbers, the importance of records, and the profound impact that seemingly mundane acts of accounting can have on the course of history. For in these humble beginnings in the rise of manorial accounting, we see the first glimmers of a world transformed, a world where knowledge is power, where information can shape destinies, and where the careful tracking of resources can build empires. It is a legacy that continues to shape our world today, a quiet but persistent pulse that echoes through the centuries, reminding us of the enduring power of order amidst chaos, of clarity amidst confusion. And so, as we step out into the cool night air, we carry with us the wisdom of the past and the promise of the future. A future built on the solid foundations laid here, in the quiet halls of medieval manors where the art of accounting first took root and began to flourish. In the quiet centuries that followed the fall of Rome, as Europe slowly pieced itself back together, a new rhythm of life began to take root across the countryside. The once mighty empire had crumbled, leaving behind a patchwork of scattered communities and forgotten knowledge. Yet from this seeming chaos, a new order emerged, one centered not on grand cities or sprawling kingdoms, but on the humble manor. These manors were not mere estates or farms, but entire worlds unto themselves. Each one was a carefully balanced ecosystem of fields and forests, of livestock and laborers. At their heart stood the manor house, often a simple wooden structure that served as both home and headquarters for the local lord. Around it, a constellation of smaller dwellings housed the peasants who worked the land, their lives inextricably bound to the soil beneath their feet. As these manorial communities grew and evolved, so too did the need to understand and manage them. It was in this context that the first whispers of what we might call accounting began to emerge. These were not the complex ledgers and balance sheets of later eras, but something far more rudimentary, and yet, in its way, no less profound. Picture a monk hunched over a scrap of parchment in the flickering light of a candle. His quill scratches softly as he records the number of sheep in the monastery's flock, pausing occasionally to murmur a prayer. Or imagine a steward, rough hands grasping a piece of charcoal, marking tallies on a wooden board to track the bushels of grain brought in from the harvest. These early accountants were not driven by dreams of profit or visions of commercial empire. Their motivations were far simpler, born of the basic need to understand the world around them. How many mouths were there to feed? How much seed must be set aside for next year's planting? What tribute was owed to the Lord, and when? In answering these questions, these early record keepers were doing more than just counting and measuring. They were, in their own way, creating a map of their world, a way to make sense of the complex web of relationships and obligations that bound their communities together. The methods they used were as varied as the manors themselves. Some relied on tally sticks, simple pieces of wood, notched to represent debts or quantities. Others used a system of colored pebbles, each hue representing a different type of livestock or crop. In monasteries, where literacy was more common, written records began to take shape, often intermingled with religious texts and commentaries. As rudimentary as these systems might seem to modern eyes, they represented a significant leap forward in human understanding. For the first time, the abstract concept of wealth could be quantified, tracked, and planned for. The ebb and flow of resources, once as mysterious and unpredictable as the tides began to take on a pattern, a rhythm that could be anticipated and managed. This was not a rapid transformation, but a slow, almost imperceptible shift that unfolded over generations. A lord might notice that keeping track of his flocks led to fewer losses. A steward might realize that careful record keeping allowed for more efficient distribution of food stores during lean winter months. Gradually, these isolated insights began to coalesce into a more systematic approach to manor management. The impact of this quiet revolution extended far beyond the practical realm of crop yields and livestock counts. It began to reshape the very way people thought about the world around them. The idea that abstract concepts could be represented by numbers and symbols opened up new avenues of thought and expression. In the fields, peasants who had once measured their plots by how long it took to plow them now spoke in terms of acres and roods. In the manor house, lords who had once gauged their wealth by the weight of their strongboxes now pored over lists and tallies, seeing their domains not just as land and people, but as a complex network of assets and liabilities. This new way of thinking brought with it new forms of power and control. Armed with more accurate knowledge of their resources, lords could demand more precise forms of tribute from their tenants. They could plan for lean years, stockpiling surpluses when harvests were good. They could make more informed decisions about which crops to plant, which animals to breed, and how to allocate labor most efficiently. Yet, for all its transformative power, this early form of accounting remained deeply rooted in the rhythms of rural life. Unlike the complex financial instruments that would emerge in later centuries, manorial accounting was intimately tied to the tangible realities of life on the land. Each number represented not an abstract value, but a living, breathing part of the community. A sheep to be shorn, a field to be plowed, a person to be fed. As the centuries passed, these simple systems of record-keeping would evolve into something far more intricate. The humble tally sticks and colored pebbles would give way to double-entry bookkeeping and complex financial ledgers. The quiet monk and the rough-handed steward would be replaced by professional accountants and financial advisors. But in those early days, as Europe slowly emerged from the shadow of Rome's fall, the seeds of a new way of understanding the world were being planted. In the fields and pastures of countless manors, a quiet revolution was taking place, one that would, in time, reshape not just the way we manage resources, but the very way we think about wealth, value, and the organization of society itself. This was the dawn of manorial accounting, a simple beginning that would, in time, grow into one of the most powerful and transformative tools in human history. Born not from grand ambitions or lofty ideals, but from the simple necessity of understanding and managing the world around us, it stands as a testament to the profound impact that even the humblest of innovations can have on the course of human civilization. In the quiet halls of medieval manors, a revolution was taking place, not one of swords and banners, but of quills and parchment. The rise of manorial accounting marked a subtle yet profound shift in the way estates were managed, transforming the very fabric of rural life. As the sun rose over the patchwork of fields and forests, stewards and bailiffs began their day not just with the crowing of roosters, but with the careful notation of every bushel and penny that passed through their domain. The manor, more than a mere collection of buildings and land, was a world unto itself, a microcosm of medieval society and economy. Within its bounds, lives intertwined in a delicate dance of duty and survival. Peasants tilled the soil, their calloused hands coaxing life from the earth. Cotters, with their small plots, eked out a living on the fringes. Villains, bound to the land, fulfilled their obligations with sweat and toil. And freemen, though fewer in number, added their skills to the tapestry of matter life. Each soul, from the lowest serf to the Lord himself, played a part in this intricate system of rural existence. At the heart of this system lay the fields carefully divided and meticulously managed. The domain, those precious acres reserved for the Lord's direct use, stood as a testament to his power and wealth. Yet alongside these, strips of land were leased to tenants, a patchwork of opportunity and obligation. Here, the seeds of manorial accounting took root. For every furrow plowed and every sheaf harvested needed to be accounted for. The quiet revolution of manorial accounting began with simple acts of record keeping. Stewards, often educated in monastic schools, began to keep detailed logs of the manor's activities. These were not grand ledgers filled with lofty ambitions, but humble rolls of parchment that captured the rhythms of rural life. In neat columns and careful script, they recorded the days each serf spent plowing the Lord's fields, the number of eggs a tenant owed as part of their rent, and whether the year's wheat harvest would see them through the winter. These records, in their unassuming way, became the lifeblood of the manor. They were acts of stewardship, preserving the delicate balance between work and reward, obligation and sustenance. In the scratching of quills and the turning of pages, a new order was emerging, one based on careful calculation and foresight rather than mere tradition. The rise of manorial accounting brought with it a new language of rural management. Terms like compotus and extent entered the vocabulary of those who oversaw the estate's affairs. The compotus, an annual account of income and expenditure, became a crucial tool for understanding the manor's financial health. Extents, detailed surveys of the manor's resources and tenants, provided a snapshot of the estate's composition and potential. As this system of accounting grew more sophisticated, it began to shape the very nature of manorial life. Lords and their stewards could now make informed decisions about crop rotation, livestock management, and labor allocation. The careful tracking of yields and expenses allowed for better planning and resource distribution. In times of plenty, surpluses could be accurately measured and stored. In lean years, the records provided a clear picture of where belt-tightening was needed. For the tenants and serfs, manorial accounting brought both benefits and burdens. On one hand, it provided a measure of protection against arbitrary demands, as their obligations were now clearly recorded and could be referenced. On the other, it meant that every aspect of their labor and dues was subject to scrutiny. The eggs they owed, the days they worked, the grain they harvested, all were meticulously noted and accounted for. The impact of this new system extended beyond the boundaries of individual manors. As lords and their administrators became more adept at managing their estates, they began to see them not just as sources of immediate wealth, but as investments to be nurtured and developed. This shift in perspective led to innovations in agricultural techniques and land management practices. Marshes were drained, woodlands cleared, and new crops introduced, all carefully documented in the ever-growing rolls of manorial accounts. Moreover, the rise of manorial accounting contributed to the gradual monetization of the rural economy. As lords became more aware of the cash value of goods and services, they increasingly commuted labor services and payments in kind to monetary rents. This shift, recorded in the manorial accounts, marked a significant step towards a more market-oriented economy. The quiet revolution of manorial accounting also had profound implications for the social fabric of medieval society. As the importance of accurate record-keeping grew, so did the status of those who possessed the skills to maintain these accounts. Literate stewards and bailiffs found themselves in positions of increasing influence, their ability to navigate the world of numbers and ledgers as valuable as any knight's sword arm. Yet for all its transformative power, manorial accounting remained, at its core, a humble practice. The records it produced were not grand proclamations or epic tales, but quiet chronicles of daily life. They told stories of harvests good and bad, of lambs born and sheep lost to wolves, of mills grinding grain and brewers crafting ale. In their pages, one could trace the ebb and flow of rural existence, the struggle against nature's whims, the rhythms of the agricultural year, the small triumphs and setbacks that made up the tapestry of medieval life. As the sun set on the manor, casting long shadows across the fields and forests, the day's activities would be carefully noted. How many bushels of wheat had been threshed? How many fleeces shorn? How many days had each tenant labored in the Lord's fields? In the flickering candlelight of the manor house, these details would be recorded, preserving for posterity the intricate workings of a world now long past. The rise of manorial accounting was not a dramatic upheaval, but a gradual, almost imperceptible shift. Yet its impact was profound, reshaping the very foundations of rural society. In the careful notation of eggs and bushels, of labor owed and rents paid, a new order was emerging, one that would pave the way for the economic and social transformations of the centuries to come. As we look back on this quiet revolution, we see more than just the birth of a new administrative practice. We see the awakening of a new way of understanding and managing the world. A world where numbers and records could illuminate the path forward, where careful stewardship could turn the cycles of nature into a sustainable way of life. In the rise of manorial accounting, we find the seeds of our modern economic systems, planted in the fertile soil of medieval estates and nurtured by the patient hands of long-forgotten stewards and scribes. In the quiet halls of medieval manors, a revolution was taking place, not with swords or plowshares, but with quills and parchment. The rise of manorial accounting, a subtle yet profound shift, began to reshape the very fabric of feudal society. As lords sought to better manage their vast estates, a new breed of clerk emerged, armed with tools both humble and powerful. The teller's chamber, often a small, dimly lit room tucked away in the manor house, was the crucible of this transformation. Here, amidst the flickering candlelight and the soft scratch of quill on parchment, the manor's fortunes were tallied, its obligations recorded, and its future planned. The air was thick with the scent of ink and the dust of dried wax seals, a sensory reminder of the weighty task at hand. At the heart of this quiet revolution lay the tools of the trade, each as essential as the last. The quill, plucked from the wing of a goose and carefully shaped, was the extension of the teller's hand. Its nib, worn soft with use, glided across the surface of the parchment, leaving behind a trail of careful figures and precise notations. The parchment itself, a precious commodity, was often scraped clean and reused, bearing silent witness to the ebb and flow of the manor's fortunes. A straightedge, simple in form yet crucial in function, ensured the neatness of columns and the clarity of accounts. With it, the teller could draw lines as straight as the furrows in the fields beyond, creating order from the chaos of numbers and names. And then there were the tally sticks, perhaps the humblest yet most ingenious of the teller's tools. These notched pieces of wood, split lengthwise, served as a physical record of debts and credits, each careful cut representing a lamb owed, a bushel of grain delivered, or a day's labor rendered. But these tools were more than mere instruments of record-keeping. In the hands of skilled manorial clerks and reeves, they became the means by which the complex web of feudal obligations was interpreted and understood. The teller's role was not simply to record, but to give meaning to the numbers, to translate the notches on a tally stick into the lived reality of the manor's inhabitants. The manor court, that solemn gathering of lord and tenant, often bore witness to the fruits of the teller's labor. As the assembled crowd hushed, the clerk would rise, parchment in hand, to read aloud the accounts. His voice, steady and clear, would carry through the timber-bird hall, each figure a thread in the tapestry of the manor's life. 2 bushels of wheat from the mill tithe, he might intone, or 4 days' labor still owed by William the smith. These recitations were more than mere bureaucracy. They were rituals of rhythm and remembrance, where the abstract world of numbers met the tangible realities of field and forge. In these moments, the manor's past was recalled, its present assessed, and its future glimpsed. The Lord might nod in approval at a bountiful harvest tally, or furrow his brow at the mention of unpaid rents. Tenants listened keenly, their own fortunes bound up in the figures being read. Sometimes, in the hushed aftermath of such a reading, a steward might lean close to the Lord's ear, murmuring, 3 days' labor still due from John of the Marsh. Such whispered asides were the stuff of which decisions were made, judgments rendered, and the delicate balance of manor life maintained. For in these numbers lay not just records, but the very pulse of the community, its prosperity, its struggles, its obligations both met and unmet. The rise of manorial accounting brought with it a new precision to the management of estates. No longer could a lord rely solely on memory or the word of his bailiff. Now there were records tangible, verifiable proof of every transaction, every agreement, every duty performed or neglected. This shift towards written accounts marked a subtle but significant change in the nature of feudal relationships, introducing an element of objectivity to what had once been a system based largely on personal bonds and oral traditions. As the practice of manorial accounting spread and evolved, so too did the skills of those who practiced it. The teller became not just a scribe, but an interpreter, a custodian of the manor's financial memory. His ability to navigate the complex web of feudal obligations, to balance the needs of lord and tenant, became increasingly valued. In some cases, A skilled clerk might rise to become a steward or even an advisor to the Lord, his expertise in numbers granting him a unique perspective on the manor's affairs. The impact of this new approach to estate management rippled outward, touching every aspect of manor life. Fields were measured with greater accuracy, crop yields recorded with increased diligence. The labor of villeins was tracked more closely, their obligations defined with newfound precision. Even the smallest details, the eggs collected from the henhouse, the fleeces shorn from the sheep, found their way into the teller's ledgers. Yet for all its precision, manorial accounting remained an art as much as a science. The teller's true skill lay not just in his ability to record figures accurately, but in his capacity to interpret them, to see the patterns and trends that might escape a less discerning eye. A sudden drop in mill revenues might signal a poor harvest, while an increase in fines collected at the manor court could indicate growing unrest among the tenants. As the sun set on another day of careful tallying and recording, the teller might pause, quill in hand, to survey his work. The parchment before him, covered in neat columns and precise figures, was more than just a record of accounts. It was a mirror reflecting the life of the manor in all its complexity, its triumphs and struggles, its abundance and scarcity, its harmony and discord. In the quiet of the teller's chamber, as the candle flickered low and the ink dried on the day's entries, one could almost hear the whisper of centuries past. For in these humble tools, the worn quill, the notched tally stick, the carefully ruled parchment, lay the seeds of a revolution. A revolution not of blood and steel, but of ink and numbers, slowly reshaping the very foundations of medieval society. The rise of manorial accounting was more than a mere change in record-keeping practices. It was a shift in how people understood their world, their obligations, and their place within the complex tapestry of feudal life. As the teller closed his ledger and sealed it away for the night, he did so knowing that his work, humble though it might seem, was guiding the manor's next step forward, one careful notation at a time. In the quiet halls of medieval manors, a revolution was taking place. Not one of swords and banners, but of quills and parchment. The rise of manorial accounting, a seemingly mundane development, would forever change the fabric of rural life. As we delve into the dusty pages of these ancient ledgers, we find more than just numbers and tallies. We discover the heartbeat of a bygone era, pulsing through the careful strokes of each entry. The manorial rolls, with their meticulous records, speak in hushed tones of a world long past. At first glance, they appear as nothing more than lists of debts and dues, harvests and holdings. But look closer, and you'll find the whispers of countless lives etched into the vellum. Here, in neat rows and columns, are the stories of those who worked the land, who knew its rhythms as intimately as their own heartbeats. John the Miller, his name appearing year after year, tells us of the steady grind of millstones and the constant flow of grain. We can almost hear the creak of the water wheel and smell the fresh flour in the air. Emma the weaver's regular payments in cloth speak of nimble fingers working tirelessly at the loom, creating warmth and comfort for her community. These are not grand tales of kings and battles, but the quiet, enduring narratives of everyday folk. The language of these records is precise, yet it holds a certain poetry. Thomas Shepard paid 2 lambs for grazing rights, one entry might read. In those few words, we can see the rolling hills dotted with fluffy white forms, hear the gentle bleating carried on the breeze. Another might note Matilda the widow, excused from labor due to infirmity. Here lies a story of hardship, of a community coming together to support one of their own in times of need. As we turn the pages, patterns emerge. The same families appear generation after generation, their fortunes rising and falling with the turn of the seasons. We see marriages formed through the merging of holdings, births recorded in the addition of new names to the tenant lists. Deaths, too, leave their mark, as properties change hands and responsibilities shift. The manorial accounts reveal a world governed by the natural rhythms of planting and harvest. Entries swell with activity in the spring and fall, recording the bustle of sowing and reaping. Winter brings a different pace, with focus turning to repairs, crafts, and the careful rationing of stores. Through it all, the steady hand of the scribe captures each detail, preserving this delicate balance for posterity. It's in the margins and between the lines that we find the true richness of these documents. A hastily scribbled note might tell of an unexpected frost, a poor harvest, or a bountiful year. These small asides paint a vivid picture of the challenges and triumphs faced by the manor's inhabitants. We can almost feel the collective sigh of relief when a good crop is brought in, or the tension in the air when supplies run low. The rise of manorial accounting brought with it a new level of organization and accountability. No longer could the Lord Steward rely on memory or rough estimates. Every bushel of wheat, every day of labor, every penny of rent had to be accounted for. This precision brought both benefits and burdens to the tenants. On one hand, it protected them from arbitrary demands. On the other, it left little room for flexibility in times of hardship. Yet even in this world of careful tallies, human nature shines through. We find entries of debts forgiven, of extra rations granted in times of need. The cold facts of accounting are tempered by the warmth of community and compassion. A note might read, John Cooper excused from work to tend his sick child, reminding us that behind every name and number was a person with hopes, fears, and loved ones. The manorial rolls also serve as a window into the changing world beyond the manor's boundaries. New crops appear in the records, speaking of expanding trade networks and changing tastes. The Black Death leaves its mark in stark entries of abandoned holdings and unpaid dues. Through it all, the steady hand of the scribe continues, recording life as it unfolds, one entry at a time. As we pore over these ancient documents, we're struck by the continuity they represent. The concerns of those long ago farmers and craftsmen are not so different from our own. They worried about making ends meet, about providing for their families, about the vagaries of weather and fortune. In their careful accounting, we see a reflection of our own attempts to bring order to an unpredictable world. The rise of manorial accounting did more than just improve record keeping. It created a shared narrative, a collective memory for the community. Each entry, each tally, Each carefully noted transaction became part of the manor's story. It bound the people to the land and to each other, creating a sense of identity and belonging that transcended individual lifetimes. In the end, these dusty old records are far more than just lists of numbers and names. They are a testament to the enduring human spirit, to our capacity for organization and cooperation. They speak of lives lived close to the land, of communities bound together by shared labor and shared fate. In their careful, measured prose, we find echoes of laughter in the fields, of prayers whispered over sickness, of celebrations in times of plenty. The language of the manorial rolls may be restrained, but it is never lifeless. Within the ink and margin lie the heartbeats of those who once tilled the soil, who sowed hope and reaped community. Names appear again and again: Robert the carpenter, Isabel the brewer, Hugh the shepherd. Their lives weren't grand, but they were vital, necessary. You'll find entries like, paid with a side of bacon for mending the mill, or granted extra seed corn due to poor yield. There is something profoundly touching in these lines, small kindnesses that resonate across the centuries. These records may seem dry at first glance, but in them pulse real struggles, real triumphs, real lives, captured in an elegant, unhurried hand that speaks volumes to those who listen. In the quiet halls of medieval manors, a silent revolution was taking place. The rise of manorial accounting, a practice as rhythmic as the seasons themselves, began to shape the very fabric of feudal life. As the sun traced its annual path across the sky, so too did the quills of stewards and scribes, etching the ebb and flow of agricultural fortunes onto parchment. The manorial year was a tapestry woven with the threads of spring's promise, summer's toil, autumn's bounty, and winter's reflection. As the first buds of spring unfurled, so too did the pages of new ledgers, crisp and full of potential. The steward, eyes keen and mind sharp, would begin his careful calculations. How many seeds remained in the granaries after the long winter? Were the plows, weathered by last year's furrows, still fit to break the thawing earth? These questions, seemingly mundane, held the weight of the coming year's success or failure. With each passing day, as the sun climbed higher in the sky, the ledgers grew thick with notations. Summer brought a flurry of activity, both in the fields and on the parchment. Early yields were meticulously recorded, each sheaf and bushel a testament to the land's generosity or parsimony. Progress was marked in neat columns, a visual representation of hope and hard work. Yet the steward's pen did not shy away from darker tidings. Warnings of blight that threatened to wither crops on the stalk, or whispers of drought that could parch the very life from the soil, found their way into the margins. A reminder of nature's capricious hand in the grand ledger of life. As summer's heat gave way to autumn's crisp embrace, the manor's accounting reached a fevered pitch. The long-awaited harvest, the culmination of a year's labor and prayer, was upon them. Every grain was measured, every fruit weighed, every animal counted. The steward's quill danced across the page, recording the bounty with a mixture of relief and pride. Comparisons to years past were drawn, trends noted, and projections made. The granary's swelling girth was carefully documented, each entry a promise against the lean months to come. With the first frost came a change in the rhythm of manorial life and its accounting. Winter descended, and as the land lay fallow, so too did the furious pace of record-keeping slow. Yet this was not a time of idleness for the manor's bookkeepers. By the warmth of crackling fires, scribes huddled over their work, tallying the year's end with methodical precision. The soft scratch of quill on parchment was punctuated by the occasional murmur as figures were read aloud, gains celebrated in hushed tones, and losses mourned with furrowed brows. This annual accounting was more than mere numbers. It was the lifeblood of the manor, a narrative of triumph and tribulation written in the language of harvests and herds. Each column told a story of fields tended, of mouths fed, of obligations met or unmet. The careful lines traced the fortunes of lord and peasant alike, their fates intertwined in the delicate balance of feudal society. As the winter deepened, the focus shifted from recording the past to preparing for the future. New ledgers were bound, their blank pages holding the promise of the coming year. Inventories were taken, seed stores assessed, and plans laid for the next turn of the wheel. It was a time of reckoning and renewal, a pause between breaths before the cycle began anew. The rise of manorial accounting brought with it a new way of seeing the world. No longer was the passage of time marked solely by the church bell or the changing leaves. Now it was measured in bushels and bales, in the ebb and flow of resources, carefully tracked and managed. This system, born of necessity and nurtured by the growing complexities of feudal administration, became the heartbeat of the manor. With each passing year, the practice grew more sophisticated. Stewards developed new methods of tracking debts and credits, of balancing the books between what was owed and what was due. The manor's fortunes became a tapestry of numbers, each thread carefully woven to create a picture of the estate's health and prosperity. This evolution in accounting practices did not occur in isolation. It reflected and reinforced the changing nature of medieval society itself. As manors grew and lords expanded their holdings, the need for accurate and detailed record-keeping became paramount. The humble ledger became a tool of power, a means by which the intricacies of feudal obligations could be navigated and enforced. Yet, for all its growing complexity, manorial accounting remained deeply rooted in the natural rhythms of the land. The turning of the pages mirrored the turning of the seasons, each entry a snapshot of a world in constant flux. Spring's hopeful projections gave way to summer's careful monitoring, autumn's frenzied tallying, and winter's thoughtful analysis. In this way, the rise of manorial accounting became more than a mere administrative innovation. It was a bridge between the tangible and the abstract, translating the physical realities of agricultural life into the realm of numbers and projections. It allowed for planning and foresight in a way that had never before been possible, giving lords and stewards alike a tool to navigate the uncertainties of medieval life. As the practice spread and evolved, it began to shape the very landscape it sought to describe. Fields were organized with an eye towards efficiency, crop rotations planned with meticulous care, and resources allocated with increasing precision. A manor, once a loose collection of traditions and obligations, became a finely tuned machine, its gears oiled by the careful calculations of its bookkeepers. Yet, for all its transformative power, manorial accounting never lost touch with the human element at its core. Behind every figure was a story of a farmer's struggle against the elements, of a miller's craft honed over generations, of a community's collective effort to survive and thrive. The ledgers, in their own way, became a chronicle of lives lived in harmony with the land, a testament to the resilience and ingenuity of medieval society. As winter gave way to spring once more, the cycle would begin anew. Fresh pages awaited the steward's pen, ready to capture the hopes and fears, the triumphs and setbacks of another year. And so the rhythm continued, as natural and necessary as the breath of life itself, echoed in every carefully inked column and meticulously drawn line. In this way, the rise of manorial accounting became not just a practice, but a philosophy, a way of understanding and interacting with the world that would shape the course of economic thought for centuries to come. It was a silent revolution, written not in the clash of swords or the proclamations of kings, but in the quiet, steady march of numbers across the page, each one a step towards a future where knowledge and foresight would become the greatest of powers. In the quiet halls of medieval manors, a revolution was brewing, not one of swords and battles, but of quills and parchment. The rise of manorial accounting, a seemingly mundane development, would prove to be a cornerstone in the evolution of European society. As the sun rose on the early Middle Ages, lords and stewards began to recognize the power of numbers, the importance of record keeping, and the value of meticulous observation. At first, these records were simple affairs. A steward might jot down the yield of a particular field or the number of sheep in a flock. These early attempts at accounting were more memory aids than formal ledgers, scrawled notes to help manage the vast estates that formed the backbone of medieval society. But as the years passed, these rudimentary records began to take on a life of their own. The manorial account books, or compotus rolls as they were known, slowly evolved into complex documents. They recorded not just the basics of agricultural production, but the intricate web of obligations, duties, and payments that bound lord and peasant alike. These rolls became a mirror of medieval life, reflecting the rhythms of the seasons and the ebb and flow of rural existence. As the practice spread, a new breed of administrator emerged. These were men skilled not just in agriculture, but in the art of numbers. They could balance accounts, track debts, and forecast harvests with increasing accuracy. Their quills scratched out a new language of management, one that would eventually reshape the very foundations of European economy. The impact of this quiet revolution was far-reaching. Lords could now manage their estates with greater efficiency, maximizing yields and minimizing waste. Peasants, too, found their lives changed. The precise recording of their obligations provided a measure of protection against arbitrary demands. The compotus rolls became a sort of contract, a written testament to the rights and duties of all who lived and worked on the manor. As the practice of manorial accounting spread, it began to standardize. Different regions developed their own styles, but certain principles remained constant. The importance of accuracy, the need for regular audits, the value of comparative data, these became the pillars upon which the edifice of medieval estate management was built. Yet for all its growing sophistication, manorial accounting remained deeply rooted in the rhythms of rural life. The turning of the seasons, the cycles of planting and harvest, the ancient customs of feast days and holy days, all these found their place in the neat columns and careful tallies of the account books. This balance between innovation and tradition was perhaps the greatest strength of manorial accounting. It allowed for gradual change, for the slow accumulation of knowledge and best practices, without disrupting the delicate social fabric of medieval society. It was a system that could adapt and evolve, yet remain true to its origins. As the centuries passed, the practice of manorial accounting continued to grow in complexity and importance. It became a tool not just for managing individual estates, but for shaping economic policy on a broader scale. Kings and their advisors began to study these accounts, seeking insights into the health of the realm and the potential for taxation. The compotus rolls also became valuable historical documents. Today, they provide historians with a window into the daily life of medieval Europe, offering insights that no chronicle or royal decree could match. From the price of grain to the wages of a plowman, from the cost of repairing a mill to the fines paid for minor infractions, all are recorded in these ancient ledgers. But perhaps the most profound impact of manorial accounting was on the mindset of those who practiced it. It fostered a culture of careful observation, of meticulous record-keeping, of rational analysis. These were skills that would prove invaluable as Europe moved towards the Renaissance and the age of exploration. The rise of manorial accounting was not without its challenges. There were those who resisted the new methods, preferring to rely on memory and tradition. Others saw in the account books a threat to their power, fearing that knowledge might shift the balance between lord and peasant. Yet despite these obstacles, the practice continued to spread and evolve. By the late Middle Ages, change began to drift gently into this world of orderly figures. The Black Death had come and gone, unsettling labor and land alike. Fewer workers meant new agreements going in place of labor, rents paid instead of reaping. With this shift came new styles of recording. Columns became more formal, running totals more common. Some manors even began to resemble small businesses, ledgers in hand. But the change was gradual, measured, and still tethered to the old rhythms. The heart of manorial accounting, its commitment to quiet observation, remained unchanged, even as Europe itself slowly modernized beyond it. The compotus rolls continued to be written, their pages filling with the minutiae of rural life, even as the world around them transformed. In time, manorial accounting would give way to more modern forms of bookkeeping. The double-entry system, developed in the bustling city-states of Renaissance Italy, would eventually supplant the older methods. Yet the legacy of those early account books lived on, in the meticulous habits of merchants and bankers, in the careful records of governments and institutions. The rise of manorial accounting, then, was more than just a change in how estates were managed. It was a shift in how people thought about the world around them. It introduced concepts of efficiency and accountability that would shape the development of modern economics. It fostered skills of analysis and forecasting that would prove crucial in the centuries to come. As we look back on this quiet revolution, we can see in it the seeds of much that we take for granted today. The idea that numbers can tell a story, that careful record keeping can lead to better decision making, that economic activities can be measured and managed. All these have their roots in those ancient commodus roles. The story of manorial accounting is, in many ways, the story of medieval Europe itself. It is a tale of gradual change, of the slow accumulation of knowledge and expertise. It is a reminder that even the most profound transformations can begin with something as simple as a quill, scratching figures on a piece of parchment. In the end, the rise of manorial accounting stands as a testament to the power of observation, the value of record keeping, and the importance of adapting to change while respecting tradition. It is a chapter in our history that deserves to be remembered, not just for what it tells us about the past, but for what it can teach us about the present and the future. In the quiet halls of medieval manors, a revolution was taking place, not with swords or banners, but with quills and parchment. The rise of manorial accounting marked a profound shift in how communities understood and managed their resources. To trace the origins of this practice is to uncover a tapestry of human ingenuity, woven with threads of necessity and foresight. The manorial roll, a seemingly mundane document, held within its lines the very essence of medieval life. Each entry, meticulously penned, was more than a mere record of transactions. It was a testament to the delicate balance between man and nature, lord and tenant, abundance and scarcity. As we unfurl these ancient scrolls, we find not just lists of crops and livestock, but the heartbeat of a society striving for order in an often chaotic world. At its core, manorial accounting was an act of faith, a belief that by recording the ebb and flow of daily life, one could somehow tame the unpredictable forces that governed existence. The steward who tallied bushels of wheat was not simply counting. He was creating a narrative of survival, a story told in harvests and herds. Each figure represented a family fed, a winter endured, a future secured. The practice emerged from necessity, born in the crucible of feudal society, where land was power and knowledge was control. Lords, seeking to maximize their estate's productivity, turned to these detailed records as a means of understanding and improving their holdings. But what began as a tool of management soon became something far more profound, a mirror reflecting the intricate web of relationships that bound medieval communities together. As the quill scratched across parchment, it etched more than numbers. It carved out the very structure of rural life. The manorial account became a silent arbiter, settling disputes and establishing precedents. It was a living document, evolving with each season, adapting to the rhythms of agricultural life. In its pages, we can trace the subtle shifts of power, the gradual changes in custom and practice that would, over centuries, reshape the landscape of Europe. The rise of this meticulous record-keeping was not without its challenges. Literacy was a rare and precious skill, often confined to the clergy and a handful of educated laymen. The task of maintaining these accounts fell to a select few, elevating their status within the community. These early accountants were more than scribes. They were the keepers of memory, entrusted with preserving the collective experience of their fellows. As the practice spread, it began to standardize the language of commerce and agriculture. Terms that we now take for granted, yield, surplus, deficit, found their roots in these early ledgers. The manorial roll became a Rosetta Stone, translating the complex realities of medieval economics into a common tongue that could be understood across regions and generations. But to view these documents solely through the lens of economics would be to miss their deeper significance. The rise of manorial accounting was, in many ways, a spiritual endeavor. In a world where the line between the sacred and the secular was often blurred, the act of recording and accounting was imbued with religious overtones. To keep accurate records was to honor God's creation, to be a faithful steward of the resources entrusted to human care. The meticulousness of these accounts speaks to a profound respect for the natural world and its cycles. Each entry was a recognition of the delicate balance that sustained life, the interplay of soil and seed, of rain and sun. In recording the yield of a field or the birth of lambs, the medieval accountant was not just tracking assets. He was bearing witness to the miracles of creation. As we delve deeper into the rise of manorial accounting, we uncover layers of meaning that extend far beyond the realm of numbers. These records were a form of collective memory, preserving the triumphs and trials of communities long after those who experienced them had passed. They tell stories of resilience in the face of famine, of innovation in times of plenty, of the constant struggle to wrest sustenance from an often unforgiving land. The practice also served as a bridge between generations, passing down knowledge and wisdom in a tangible form. A son could learn from his father's successes and failures, not through oral tradition alone, but through the concrete evidence preserved in the manorial rolls. This continuity of knowledge was crucial in a world where change was slow and hard-won improvements could easily be lost without proper documentation. Moreover, the rise of manorial accounting laid the groundwork for future developments in finance and governance. The principles established in these humble ledgers would, in time, evolve into the sophisticated accounting practices that underpin modern economies. The idea that one could gain insight and control through careful record keeping was revolutionary, paving the way for more complex systems of management and analysis. As the practice matured, it began to influence the very structure of society. The regular rhythm of accounting, the yearly audits, the seasonal tallies, imposed a new sense of order on rural life. Time itself seemed to bend to the will of the ledger, with the agricultural year increasingly defined by the demands of record keeping, as much as by the natural cycles of planting and harvest. Yet for all its power to shape and order, manorial accounting remained, at its heart, a deeply human endeavor. Behind every entry lay a story of toil and hope, of lives lived in close communion with the land. The rise of this practice did not just change how resources were managed. It changed how people understood their place in the world and their relationship to the forces that govern their lives. In the end, the story of manorial accounting is a story of transformation, of how a simple act of record-keeping grew into a system that would help define an era. It is a testament to the power of observation and reflection, to the human capacity for creating order out of chaos. As we look back on this quiet revolution, we are reminded that even the most mundane of tasks can, over time, reshape the world in profound and lasting ways. To study the rise of manorial accounting is to peer into the very soul of medieval society, to see reflected in its pages the hopes, fears, and aspirations of countless generations. It is a reminder that history is not just written in grand gestures and momentous events, but in the patient, persistent efforts of those who sought to understand and improve their world, one careful entry at a time. As our journey through the annals of manorial accounting draws to a close, we find ourselves standing at the edge of a world both familiar and distant. The sun dips low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the parchment-strewn tables of the manor house. We've traversed centuries, dear listener, through the meticulous scratches of quill on vellum, the careful tallies of harvests and hearth taxes. In these final moments, let us pause and reflect on the quiet revolution that unfolded within these stone walls. The rise of manorial accounting was not a tale of grand battles or sweeping political upheavals. Instead, it was a story written in the margins, in the careful columns of income and expenditure, in the patient recording of every bushel and penny. As we take our leave of this medieval world, can you hear the whisper of pages turning? The soft rustle of parchment as a steward closes his ledger for the night? These are the sounds of a new order taking shape, a world where numbers began to speak as loudly as words. Imagine, if you will, the flickering candlelight illuminating the face of a young clerk, his brow furrowed in concentration as he balances the manor's accounts. This humble scene, repeated countless times across the land, was the crucible in which modern financial practices were forged. From these simple beginnings grew the complex systems that would one day govern empires and shape the course of nations. But let us not get ahead of ourselves. For now, we remain in the quiet of the manor, where the day's labors are coming to an end. The fields lie silent under the gathering dusk, the livestock settled in their pens. In the great hall, the lord of the manor pores over the day's figures, his finger tracing the neat rows of entries that tell the story of his domain's prosperity or its struggles. As we prepare to bid farewell to this world of quills and parchment, of harvests and feudal obligations, let us take a moment to appreciate the beauty in these mundane details. For it is in these careful records that we find the true heartbeat of history, not in the clash of swords or the proclamations of kings, but in the steady rhythm of daily life, meticulously recorded and preserved. The rise of manorial accounting may seem, at first glance, a dry subject. But as we've seen, It is a tale rich with human endeavor, with the striving for order in a chaotic world. It speaks to our deepest instincts to measure, to record, to understand. In these ancient ledgers, we see reflected our own desires to make sense of our place in the world, to leave our mark, however small, on the pages of history. As the night draws in and the candles burn low, we can almost hear the soft scratching of quills, a murmur of voices reciting figures, the gentle thud of leather-bound volumes being closed for the night. These are the lullabies of a world slowly awakening to the power of numbers, to the poetry hidden in columns of figures. And what of the people who inhabited this world? The stewards and bailiffs, the reeves and auditors, they were not so different from us. They too faced the daily challenge of balancing books and managing resources. They too knew the satisfaction of a ledger that balanced perfectly, the frustration of a discrepancy that eluded explanation. In their careful notations and meticulous calculations, we see echoes of our own struggles and triumphs. As we prepare to leave this medieval world behind, let us carry with us the lessons it has to teach. The rise of manorial accounting reminds us that great changes often begin in the most unassuming of places. It teaches us the value of patience, of attention to detail, of the quiet persistence that can, over time, reshape the world. The legacy of these early accountants lives on, not just in the dusty archives of manor houses and monasteries, but in the very fabric of our modern world. Every time we balance a checkbook, file a tax return, or pore over a spreadsheet, we are, in a sense, communing with those long-ago stewards and their carefully inked ledgers. As the last light fades from the sky and the manor settles into the stillness of night, we too prepare to take our leave. But before we go, let us pause for a moment more to listen to the whispers of history that linger in these halls. Can you hear them? The soft rustle of parchment, the quiet click of an abacus, the measured breath of a scribe bent over his work. These are the sounds of a world slowly changing, of knowledge accumulating, of order emerging from chaos. And so, dear listener, as we step away from the manor house and its parchment-lined studies, we carry with us a deeper appreciation for the quiet revolutions that shape our world. The fields have grown still, the day's accounts are settled, and the figures rest peacefully in their bound volumes. These may not be the grand moments that fill the pages of history books, but perhaps they are the ones that speak most truly to our own experiences. Steady, grounded, softly spoken, these are the rhythms of daily life, the foundation upon which all greater things are built. As we make our way home through the gathering darkness, may the gentle wisdom of these ancient records accompany us. May we find in their patient accumulation of detail a reminder of the power of persistence, of the beauty that can be found in the most ordinary of tasks. And as sleep begins to settle over us, soft as the evening mist on a freshly harvested field, may we carry with us the peace of a world well-ordered, of accounts balanced, of stories told in the language of numbers. And now, dear listener, we leave the manor and its parchment shadows. The fields have grown quiet again. The ink has dried, and the numbers are gently asleep in their bound volumes. These are not the grand moments of history, but perhaps they are the ones most like us. Steady, grounded, softly spoken. May these gentle records soothe your thoughts, and may sleep settle over you like the calm of a well-kept field.